So how do you pass the CritiCall test? It's a very complex question. To start with, the agencies themselves get to select what criteria or measurement of grades is used to pass. So their baseline, oftentimes they'll just bring in their own dispatchers to write the test, and then they set the baseline at that. So it is different everywhere. I mean, there's different grades, 70 or 80. It's usually in those kind of ballparks, but again, I can't stress enough that it is different everywhere. And even the agencies, when they start using the CritiCall test, they really don't even know where to set them at. Most of them will bring in a handful of their dispatchers to write, see what a good grade is for a, what's considered to be a good candidate, and then they'll use that as their baseline. And they may have to adjust that once they start getting people through if they find that they're getting too many or too few candidates based on that baseline mark. Now, another section of this to consider is that every section has a grade separately. So some agencies require that you pass each section. Some agencies require that you say, for example, just get a 50 on each section, but get an overall mark of 70, or they require that you get a 70 on certain sections that are more important to them, or they require that you get, a 70 or an 80 on every single section. So there are a lot of different ways that a pass is measured, and so you really need to consider that when you're writing. Not to mention that in all likelihood, you're never going to get your grade back from these people, so you're never going to know how you did. So how do you pass the CritiCall test? It's all about preparation. So this test alone is going to be, that wow factor for you. First of all, you have to pass it just to get the interview. But if you walk into that interview knowing that you got a 95 on the CritiCall test versus the guy that got a 71, that looks very, very different to the people doing that interview and giving out those jobs. So this is your opportunity, not just to pass, but to really, really shine. And I really recommend fully preparing for this test. I do realize that a lot of the test prep sites do charge money, but I would ask you to consider, what's $50 now if you're going to start making $30 an hour down the road. So please consider, how much cost the preparation is if this is really what you want to do and what you want to be for your career. So how do you pass? Here's what I would do. And again, this is just me. I am, however, a curriculum designer, a 911 I'm actually a professor in a college of emergency management and other emergency services. And so what I would do, my strategy is I would write a practice test. Use that as my baseline assessment for my skills. So I would write the test, then go back through it afterwards and figure out what sections I did poorly on and what sections I did well on. I would brush up on all sections if I had time, but I would definitely focus on those sections that you find challenging or that you got poorer marks on. So go back through, comb through, get your results. You can use that as your assessment and then study those sections. So you're gonna, after that, study those sections. You can use a study guide from one of the prep sites like 911professor.com, or you can make up your own. I'm not saying you have to buy my practice test. You can make up your own ways to study. If the keyboarding itself is a problem for you, anybody can set up a keyboarding test. You just pull up MS Word, start typing out a random books that you have in your house, and then use the word count after you do it on a timer. So you can do this for free as well. Now, after you're done that, I do recommend going back in then and doing at least one other practice test, but maybe multiples. And if you do another one, then at that point, you can see that, if your skill set has actually bumped up. Now, I had a couple students last week tell me that they tried to use a practice test and then study and then go back and do the same practice test. And they said, we did so much better, but how can we be sure it wasn't because we already did that exact test and combed through all the answers? And I would argue that obviously that's the case. So I do recommend using one test for your assessment and then studying and then going back and using a second test to ensure that you're hitting those markers and that you have improved those grades. CritiCall will tell you that studying for this test doesn't help. They say that it's one of those tests where you either have it or you don't. And I do not believe that. I do not believe that's ever the case. First of all, just knowing what you're walking into is going to be helpful. Even if you had no time to study, just doing a practice test so you actually knew what to anticipate, helpful. And on top of that, what skill can you not get better at by practicing? That's unheard of. you can improve anything if you want. So I really recommend, again, doing a practice test as an assessment, figuring out what you need to work on, and then practicing that, and then coming back around and doing another one. And maybe you keep doing that process. Maybe you study certain sections, write it again, see if your mark improved, study some more, practice some more, come back again, write another assessment. You can keep doing that, right? A lot of the test sites, including mine, offer multiple tests. So you can come back a couple of times and keep trying and assessing yourself. But you do want to make sure that you have a study guide so that you are able to actually teach yourself to improve and gain tips from people who specialize in this field. So that is, in a nutshell, how I would pass the CritiCall test. I wish you the best of luck on your CritiCall test and your preparation for it. And please, please do spend some time preparing. Best wishes on your career. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.